السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم واجعلنا منهم، اللهم آمين. Inshallah, in this class we will cover few issues. In the beginning, we'll talk about who can claim victory for Gaza, what does that mean, and then we'll discuss some of the latest events in Gaza, and we'll say at the end few things about Lebanon and why we included Lebanon this time. To start with, in the Hebrew press, in the last few days, there was this news that Netanyahu is on the verge of declaring victory over Al-Qassam in Gaza. And the circumstances for this, we need to understand, is that there's a conflict that became clear between Netanyahu and the army. And there was another conflict between the Haredim, those who are the religious who do not want to serve in the army, and the rest of the army and many different parties other than the religious parties. Then there was a conflict between Netanyahu and part of his group who wanted to have exclusive appointments for rabbis in the neighborhoods, because now it's the local administrations that appoint rabbis. So the Shas party, which is one of the parties that support the coalition headed by Dir'i, who's a Moroccan Jew, this group represents mostly the Arab Jews who are now part of the fabric of the occupation in Palestine. So they wanted to have exclusive rights to appoint their own rabbis, which means money. So the point that you have the right to appoint the rabbis of your choice, it means tens of millions of dollars, if not eventually hundreds of millions over the years for the organization. And this also ended up in failure with Dir'i threatening to bring down the government. Also, there was another conflict after Gantz stepped down from or resigned from the war cabinet, and at the same time, one of his proteges who's in the same party, Eisenkot, who was a non-voting member of the war cabinet, stepped down, resigned, and there was too much pressure that was put on Netanyahu to accept the most extremist elements in his coalition, Ibn Gfir and Smotrich, to replace the two. So basically, Ibn Gfir and Smotrich wanted to be on the war cabinet. And Ibn Gfir have been asking to be in the cabinet from the time that Gantz have joined. And it would have been, of course, a disaster for Netanyahu, because the US is considering sanctions on Ibn Gfir and Smotrich. We'll explain later why. So for him to get out of each one of those traps, he will find a way. When it came to the war cabinet and the Smotrich and Ibn Gfir asking to be members, he said, okay, I'm going to dissolve the war cabinet, so we no longer have a war cabinet. So he got out of that. Because as long as he had the war cabinet, those two insisted that they would need to be members of that war cabinet. So he said, I am dissolving the war cabinet. And as many of you know from previous classes, Netanyahu would say the war cabinet reflects unity of the Israelis around him, because Gantz is a leader of the opposition. So when Gantz left and Eisenkot left, and they really made it clear that Netanyahu is doing things for his personal aims, for his personal purposes. For example, Eisenkot said that we had tried to go to Rafah early on, 3 months ago, and Netanyahu will say no. He said we should have went to Rafah, and that's what the war cabinet discussed, but Netanyahu always objected. And of course, there's a purpose why Netanyahu has delayed the Rafah. Because basically, he wants to extend this war as long as possible until the American elections. So Eisenkot says, you know, from a military perspective, from a pragmatic, practical perspective, we should have went into Rafah 3 months ago, and we have tried our best to push for this, and Netanyahu would say no. And they made it clear, both Eisenkot and Gantz, that he was acting on his personal interests. Because as long as he's a prime minister, he will not go to jail. Remember, he is indicted, and there's a court case against him for corruption and graft. This is way before October 7. So if he is to be finished from leadership, he will end up in jail, just like other prime ministers before him, for corruption. Because this, you know, society is known for lots of corruption in this regard, including bribes, including favors, that, you know, lots of money. And again, you know, he's not the first, and he will not be the last in this regard. Corruption is rampant in many of the governments around the world, and the Zionists, it's not that they are no exception in this regard. They are at the top of the list historically with all those cases against them. So from this perspective, what he was planning to do is to say, we have defeated Al-Qassam. Because he cannot say we defeated Hamas. He cannot say we defeated Hamas. Remember that initially, the Zionists put 3 objectives for the war. 3 objectives. Elimination of Hamas. Return of all the hostages. And the third one, de-radicalization of Gaza. And now they cannot claim any of them. Hamas is still as strong as it was. And the hostages, the bulk of them are still in Gaza, although the Zionist army control all of Gaza at this point. All of Gaza is under their control, including the borders. The border, the Rafah border into Egypt, it's in their control. They already burned the visitor center in Rafah. So he cannot come and say, we defeated Hamas. Because the army spokesman, official spokesman last week, went public by saying, we cannot destroy Hamas. Hamas is an idea, and it's deep-rooted in the hearts of the people of Gaza. And we cannot take this thing out. And that got Netanyahu and his ministers to go berserk. Because basically, the army that's fighting the war says, we cannot achieve this objective. And Netanyahu and his Minister say, yeah, the army is there to fulfill, the will of the political, the government, basically. He's saying that we have a country with an army. We do not have an army with a government. We have a government that has an army. But he's saying, basically, what we are seeing, we really have an army that says, this is my country, and the army is taking the decisions. And there was this thing broke into the public sphere. So, the other complication when it comes to the army is that they are extending the retirement age of the army reserve. So basically, those people who were thinking that, next month they will finish their service, they extend it for a long period of time. And this came at exactly the same time that they did not come with a solution to have the 15% of the population who's the Haredim to enlist in the army, because they are still exempted. They basically says, we study the Torah, and we are being victorious in all the war from 1948 until now because of us, not because of the army efforts. We are the ones who are bringing victory by studying the Torah. And there's a law that says unless they enlist, they will not get money. And for the past so many years, they have been milking the state of hundreds of millions of dollars by being members of governments, regardless if it was on the left or the right. Those religious parties, they get into the government because there's not a clear majority on either side, and they keep putting condition and milking the government of money. Now the Supreme Court have issued a judgment that they cannot get the money unless they enlist, which caused them to come to the US trying to get $116 million as a first payment, saying basically to the American public, mostly the American Jews, that the people at Yeshiva, those who study the Torah and the classes, are more important than the Zionists. Which means that there's this conflict that start being shown more and more, and the division to be deeper and deeper between the different sectors of the society. His problem also, as we mentioned earlier, with the part of the parties that are with him who trying to pull benefits to their side, either Shas, that he went to the extent of striking a deal with the Arab member of Knesset, Abbas, not Abbas of Palestinian Authority, the Abbas of the 1948, to try to vote for it. And he thought that he gonna secure enough votes to keep buying Shas and its members. But what he got is a revolt within the Likud party. They said, we will not vote for it. So in the last minute, he withdrew the legislation, which brought the anger of the Shas party and its apparatus within the government. The most important thing when it comes to Netanyahu and what's going on is that he went on national TV and he accused the US government of holding weapons from the Zionists. He was saying basically that the US government is holding the weapons. They are not supplying us with the weapons. And, this is affecting us. Although he come and say, oh, we still can handle Gaza and can handle Lebanon with what we have. But it's very clear that just like what the Quran mentioned, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about Bani Israel, they live with dhillah. They're being suppressed, enslaved. throughout history, except if they have support from God or support from the people. And this is yet another evidence, because they no longer have the support of God. Obviously, they are the enemies. Those Zionists are the enemies of God. And we can elaborate. So they cannot claim that, God is on their side, although they keep saying, we are the chosen people. Even the atheists among them, those who do not believe in God, they say, we are chosen people. Who chose you? If you do not believe in a God, who chose you? The devil? If you do not believe in a God, I guess the other alternative is being chosen by the devil. So from this perspective, Netanyahu came strong against the US. Although the habl, the rope of support, is coming directly from the US. And this brought to the open a conflict that was there on a low scale, to the point that the US government at different levels say, well, we do not know what he's talking about. What we hold is the 2,000 smart bombs, but everything else is being delivered. And many, even within the establishment in Cuba, Palestine, got upset with him because it just increased the division, the huwa, the difference between the Zionists and their masters in Washington, D.C. I say their masters because the Zionists are not the masters of the U.S., as some people believe. It's the other way around. U.S. is using them. They are the ones there who are putting their lives in danger all those years and trying to work for the interests of others, being used. That's the habl min al-nas, the support that's given to them by the U.S. And another part of it, he's trying to give Trump an edge by saying Biden has not given us the weapons. What is it that he's telling the Jews in the US? Vote for Trump. Because he thinks that if Trump becomes president, he can do whatever he wants. And from this reflects his stupidity, of course. Because you do not know Trump. Trump only looks for the best interest of Trump. And if Trump wins the second term, he does not need to reform to get the votes of the Jews or the Christians on the far right. He's free to do whatever, and you do not know. This guy is working for Putin. There's no doubt. We have discussed this in detail in the past, that the secret meetings, when he do meetings with Trump, be sure that the minutes of the meetings do not go beyond him. He has it in his hand, and he does not share it. And he have expressed that he has business interest before, and he said, if I win, the war between Russia and Ukraine will end in one day. Of course, he's gonna come to Zelensky and say, stop it. No weapons, no money. In this regard. Salam. So for Netanyahu to count that, if Trump wins, then he can do whatever he wants, totally mistaken in this regard. Because this is a fox. This person is sick. He thinks he's better than Isa alayhi salam. And he have said it, He thinks that he has some godly blood in him. So if he comes, he's gonna work for himself, not for the Zionists. It's just today in the American media, they talk about his jokes in front of Jewish executives, talking about the nice ovens in Germany and laughing. He's talking about the Holocaust, the nice ovens in this regard. And he have made more than one statements of anti-Semitic. And when the people marched in Virginia and said Jews will not replace us, he said there are fine people on both sides, meaning those guys, they are fine, just like the other side who opposed them. So that gamble is not necessarily, but this is what he thinks. Because, Trump with his son-in-law has brought, the Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco to normalize the relationship with the Zionists. So he thinks this thing will continue. And again, remember that in October, when the things took place in Palestine, Biden asked the Congress after that to approve $14 billion to the Zionists in Palestine. And the Republicans refused to vote on it because Trump told them no. Until 2 months ago. So for 6 months, those who have stopped this aid package to the Zionists were the Republicans on the orders of Trump. Because Trump does not want to give Biden a victory. When he gave yes, then it went through. So the Jews have said, well, the credit goes to Trump and the Republicans. Although the one who asked originally for it was Biden. So this conflict that came to the open, and today we have the Defense Minister Gallant coming to Washington to try to meet and come up what he said the third stage of the war. But Netanyahu so far did not claim victory. But what he said is the following. The extensive part of the war is over. We are close to the finish of this period in the war. But I will not allow for a Palestinian state. I will not allow for the Palestinian Authority to come to Gaza. And so on and so forth. This was a television interview that he did with his favorite channel, that's the mouthpiece for Netanyahu, which is TV channel 14. The opponent on the other side is channel 12. And Netanyahu and his people call channel 12 Al Jazeera 2. In fact, this channel has asked for an apology and for $1 million shekel penalty for calling them Al Jazeera 2, basically saying they are traitors. Now, why do I bring all those details? To show that the fracture within the Zionist entity in Palestine is becoming larger and larger and larger. And the fact that the army officially come with the official statement saying we cannot eliminate or finish Hamas. And you have former generals and people who were in charge of intelligence service coming and saying the same thing. And that's where this term, we defeated Kata'ib al-Qassam. Because the first one, no one will believe it. And in fact, they kept saying, Rafah, 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 Rafah. The US administration said Rafah is the red line. The red line became pink, and the army entered Rafah from all its sides. And so far, all what they could get, 4 hostages. When they got the 4 hostages, they killed the 3 hostages, and they killed one of their elite forces. Plus, about 500 Palestinians. 500 Palestinians were killed on that event. So how it could be that you are in total control of all of Gaza And again, Gaza is smaller than Raleigh. The whole of Gaza is smaller than Raleigh. And Rafah would be a neighborhood. Rafah would be a neighborhood. They kept telling the people of Gaza, go south for safety. And then they go after the south, and people are all over the place. So this genocide, unfortunately, will continue. And the aspect, unfortunately, that is helping them is that secret meeting that took place in Bahrain. A secret meeting that took place in Bahrain, attended by US generals, Zionist generals, generals from Egypt, Jordan, Saudi, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. First of all, it's really funny to say Bahraini generals. I mean, this should bring laughter to anyone. What Bahraini generals? I mean, there was some demonstration in Bahrain. They could not do anything about it. They imported 2,000 troops from Saudi to control the demonstration. What war did Bahrain went through to have generals? Or, you know, the Emirati or the Saudi generals. We saw their performance in Lebanon, in Yemen. They destroyed the country without achieving anything. They used soldiers from Morocco and from Sudan, and they were paying $5,000 a month for each head. Because they do not have really army to fight. They just use, will come inshallah. They just use their money to manipulate people and manipulate forces and manipulate parties. But anyway, this supposedly secret meeting which came in the press, in the Israeli press, and later the Arab press and the Western press, basically was talking about what to do with Gaza. And it says, according to, by the way, Qatar was excluded, although Qatar has the money too. But they did not want to be Qatar part of the mix. They only want the very trusted partners, the brothers of Netanyahu. They do not want the cousins, because the other cousins, you know, from Qatar and other, they still, you know, working, although they take stand on and off, positive to the people of Gaza, but the whole Arab setting is in agreement with that this future of the bulk of Palestine will go to the Jews. This was the plan, you know, originally. We once discussed this issue, that this was a Muslim issue. Palestine was a Muslim issue, an Ummah issue. And then the Arabs came, Jamal Abdel Nasser and company. The Muslims, leave this to us, to the Arabs, we'll take care of it. And in the 60s, those Arabs, governments, formed the PLO with Yasser Arafat as the head. And who was the vice of Yasser Arafat? Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas was very, very close to the West. And he was put as a vice chairman of the PLO from the 60s. And they know him very well, who he is working for. Because they know at the end that they want to cut a deal with the Zionists. And that's what the Arab countries put the PLO up front in 1988, saying they are the representative of the Palestinian people, deal with Palestine. So it's no longer even an Arab issue, this is a Palestinian issue. But the surprise came when the people in Palestine, in Gaza, took the initiative on October 7 and changed the whole dynamics in the area and exposed the weakness of the Zionists and took a war that's now in its 9 months, with their economy suffering, with their population suffering, with their reputation around the world suffering, with people hating the word of Zionists. It's become a very dark word with very dark image, horrible, connected to genocide and killings. And suddenly, Abbas, the biggest traitor of them all, the Arab countries, and those Arabs come and say, oh, Hamas did not consult us. MashaAllah. So they were expecting Hamas to give them a phone call, you know, we are planning, something. And of course, you know, I mean, who is stupid would do such a thing to give any hint to King Abdullah of Jordan or Muhammad ibn Salman or Muhammad ibn Zayed, Mordechai, son of Zaydun, and Mordechai, son of Solomon in Saudi, to tell them that we are planning something? Of course they will not consult them, because they are conspiring with the Zionists against Hamas. Make no mistake, they are conspiring with the Zionists against Hamas. Today there was a report that the trade level between those countries and the Zionists double of what it was last year. This is a report today. The trade level is double of what it was last year. And Zionist minister, or I should say, I'm sorry, a member of Knesset, member of parliament, goes public to thank Saudi and the Emirates and Jordan for delivering lots of supplies to the Zionists from ships that deliver it to Abu Dhabi. Thousands of trucks. And the Israeli press had videos of those trucks coming with the supplies when their brethren in Gaza dying from hunger. So it's not just, those people have lost any shame. Believe me, Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, they had some dignity in them. When it was suggested, when Khadija radiallahu anha was alive, it was suggested to the kuffar of Quraysh, the leadership, why don't we just go inside the home, a group of people, and assassinate Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and finish? This is before the attempt to kill him before he went to Medina. This was early on. And Abu Jahl, imagine Abu Jahl will tell them, are you crazy? What the Arabs will say about us? Would we go inside the home in a sudden move and our cousin Khadija is not dressed? He has some dignity. Those people have zero of it. هم العدو فاحذرهم. هم العدو فاحذرهم. That's what Allah said. هم العدو فاحذرهم. Now, of course, when it comes in public, you will find those, we condemn this thing in Gaza. We condemn. So when Netanyahu came, was it like a month and a half ago or so, he came out and says, we have a plan for Gaza after the war. The United Arab Emirates and the Saudis will take a role. And they went berserk. I mean, they condemned Netanyahu. They said, don't use our name, because he's exposing them. I mean, they are talking in secret and they are agreeing. But don't bring our names. And when the Saudis says, oh, we will not normalize relations until they establish a Palestinian state. Total baloney. I mean, I'll give you the evidence. The Saudi press, few months ago, came out saying that the normalization between Saudis and the Israelis slowed down to a standstill because Israel is not serious about the Palestinian state. That's what the Saudi press said. Same week, Mohammed bin Salman came on CNN and was asked, said, no, we are meeting every day. And this thing is improving every day. We are getting closer to the target every day. In the same week that his own press said the negotiation have stalled because they do not care about the Palestinian state at all. And they do not care about Gaza or the people of Palestine. Rest assured that they are coordinating with the Zionists against the people of Palestine. When Sadat went to Jerusalem and the Camp David Accord started, Sadat came with a full package, including the West Bank and Gaza. And Menachem Begin told him, no, let's talk about Sinai and that's it. Gaza and the West Bank, that's our issue. And Sadat went with the whole package with the support of the Arab governments who eventually said, oh, we have nothing to do with what Sadat have done, although they followed him one by one. You know, the poet Ahmed Matar has a nice poetry on this. Showed that they call him, you know, a Thor. The ox, each one will follow. But anyway, just for the sake of time, let's shift gears on what is happening. There was a bombshell this week. And in fact, you know, the events really, each week, one of these events would have been big, big news. But there are so many events that people sometimes do not pay attention. The New York Times said that they have a secret recording of a gathering of Smotrich, who's the right-wing, most extreme with Ibn Ghaffar, talking to settlers in a meeting. And this was not recorded officially. Somebody recorded and gave it to the New York Times. And the Zionists did not deny it. In fact, we have evidence that I will talk about it that's being implemented. So what Smotrich said in that recording is, we have a secret plan. And we start implementing the secret plan. And Netanyahu is in full support with us. This secret plan calls for unofficial annexation of the West Bank. What does that mean? In Oslo agreement, Arafat and his people, later known as the Palestinian Authority, were put in charge of Gaza and the West Bank. This, of course, came after the Second Intifada. I'm sorry, the First Intifada. The First Intifada. And the Israelis were at a loss how to deal with it. And Arafat thought that he will have problems because Hamas has taken over, so he agreed to the Oslo Agreement. So part of the Oslo Agreement is the West Bank and Gaza will be under the Palestinian Authority. Only the major cities in the West Bank. The rest of the area is under Israeli either direct control or indirect control. So Abbas and his people supposedly were in charge of the major cities. Khalil, Nablus, of course Jerusalem is not part of this, Ramallah, Qalqilia, Jenin, and so on and so forth. Of course, now this is history. The whole West Bank is occupied. But what it is that this area, the West Bank, is under the Israeli army command. It's quote-unquote occupied land. So the army runs it. The way the system works is in Jerusalem and the rest of Palestine, that from the 1948 land and Jerusalem, the police is in charge. In fact, the army have no control. The police tell the army what to do. In the West Bank, and before that in Gaza, it's the Israeli army that's in charge. And the Israeli police cannot do anything in this regard. So, what Smotrich is talking about in this secret recording is that him, Ibn Ghaffar and company, and with the support of Netanyahu, will be putting a civil administration in charge of the West Bank. What does that mean? It's no longer an occupied land, it's part of Israel. Case is over. And he said, we are doing this so that this will never be part of a Palestinian state. But he said we cannot announce it because it will create so many problems if we announce that we're going to annex the West Bank. You remember Trump gave them a signature to annex the Golan Heights, right? Gave them the transfer of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So now what remains is Gaza and the West Bank. So the Smotrich is working on this plan with the support of Netanyahu and the rest to do this unofficially. Unofficially. And the process already, in fact, started, which gives credibility. As I said, first of all, the Zionists did not deny that part, that this thing took place. They did not say this is a lie, because the recording is there. But the implementation already started. Let me just read you 2 paragraphs from the Times of Israel today. This is today's news. You can go and see it. It says, after saying this guy, his name is Roth, under somebody whose name is Fox, he said, the powers delegated to Roth under Fox's order include authority over real estate, transactions, government property, land and water arrangements, protection of holy places. Notice this, protection of holy places except the cave of the patriarch, Rachel's tomb, and Samuel's tomb. I'll come to those. Forestry laws, tourism, public bathing, planning of cities, villages and construction, some land registration processes, management and administration of regional council, and many more. So basically, the civil administration, the Israeli civil administration, not the army, those were all under the army. This, a new law that was signed by the general in charge, his name is Hashim. I guess he's a Druze in this regard. He's an army general or major general. So officially now, all those things are under civilian authority, meaning that they no longer treat the West Bank as, quote unquote, occupied under military rule. Alaykum as-salam wa barakatuh. And this is very serious. This is a very serious step. It's just really an implementation of what was in the New York Times leak this week. Let me just say a few words about the 3 exceptions. They said the cave of the patriarchs. What's meant the cave of the patriarchs? Al-Haram al-Ibrahimi, the Ibrahimi mosque. Why it's called the cave of the patriarch? Because it has the bodies of Sayyidina Ibrahim, Sayyidina Ishaq, his wife. We have also Sayyidina Yusuf there, Sayyidina Yaqub. They are buried all in this mosque that's called Al-Ibrahimi Mosque. If you remember, in 1994, there was a massacre where an American Zionist entered, Dr. Goldstein entered the mosque at Fajr prayer and killed the 28 Musallin in Fajr prayer. They were making their salah. He came from the back with a machine gun, and they only were able to get him when he finished the first round and tried to change the magazine. They captured him and they killed him with their fist, because he cannot have a knife. The Palestinian cannot get a knife to enter into the masjid. That's the cave of the patriarch, is exception. Racial tomb is what's known to the Muslims as Masjid Bilal ibn Rabah. It's in the Beit Lahem area, and Rachel is the mother of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? You remember Yaqub alayhi salam has the 12 children, 10 from one wife and 2 from Rachel. So this Rachel place is called Masjid Bilal ibn Rabah, and the last one is Samuel tomb. And this place is called Nabi Samuel, a village where they say that the Nabi, he's not the messenger, he's not Rasul, he was a Nabi. Nabi Samuel, this is what was mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. إذ قالوا لنبي لهم ابعث لنا ملكا نقاتل. This Nabi is Nabi Samuel. And this place is a huge masjid that the Israelis kept pushing the people in Nabi Samuel. It's about 8 kilometers from Jerusalem. So basically saying with those 3 exceptions, because this is totally under Israeli control because they want the army. Why? Because the Palestinians, Muslims, in fact, even the Christians believe in holiness of those places. But Muslims go and have festivals there. And those festivals go back to the time of Salah ad-Din. I remember when I was like 5 or 6, we went to a place called Nabi Musa. So we have Nabi Musa, Nabi Samuel, and Nabi Robin in Palestine. Those three places where Palestinians go, they do dabka, and they spread, sweets. And this again goes to the time of Salah ad-Din when he took over Palestine. He asked the Moroccans to stay. We said 25% of his army was from the north of Africa, northwest. Stay, and he would make festivals each year to declare that this is a Muslim area. So they are saying that with the exception of those three, the whole of the West Bank will be subject to this. What's the key thing in there? They will be in charge of the land and the registration and the real estate, meaning that they can build as many settlements as they want without the court, without objections. That's very serious. And most likely, if it was not an election year, the US would have put immediate sanctions on both, because it goes all the way against all what the US has been propagating since they accepted and pushed for the division of Palestine in 1948. For the sake of time, let me shift to Lebanon. From the beginning of the war until about 2 weeks ago, we have been saying that the war between Israel and Hezbollah is a very low key, with the understanding on both sides they wanted a limited war. Meaning, you kill someone, we'll throw some missiles, we kill someone, you throw some missiles, you kill a leader, we do this, we'll do that. It's a low level, engagement. This was the case until 2 weeks ago. And the UN have discussed this, that those are measured escalation, but they are measured. UN have talked about this, many politicians have talked about it, that this is an understanding between Hezbollah and the Zionists, since Hezbollah have to do something because of the expectation and the push of Iran, that it's very, very limited engagement. Now, since Netanyahu does not have any brakes on him, because before that Gantz was doing the brakes. So Gantz will not allow a push through Lebanon. And Netanyahu cannot claim victory in Gaza. Again, the maximum that he would say, we have control over Kata'ib al-Qassam. He cannot say we eliminate Hamas. He cannot say we get the hostages, because there's still more than 140 of them dead or alive still in Gaza. And he cannot really brag about anything. So there is now a perspective of a war in the north. And part of this attack on the Biden administration by Netanyahu, saying they are not giving us the necessary weapons, and coming clearly and saying, give us the tools, we will finish the job. Oh, so you do not have the tools to finish the job. He said, give us the tools to finish the job. Because the army is complaining. They are extending its service. The Haradim is not enlisting. And they will call more of the reserve. So the only thing that he can do now is to do some kind of operation in Lebanon. But that's very dangerous too. And today they gave this impression in a subtle way that they may use nuclear weapons. Because they said, we are not going to use the typical weapons. What else? So basically, they are alluding that either to scare Hezbollah or to prepare the war, because they do have some tactical nuclear weapons that would be limited because, again, if you throw a big bomb like Hiroshima and this, the wind will bring it back to Tel Aviv and Haifa and Jaffa, and you are, in trouble because you are within, kilometers of the borders of Lebanon. So this is really, I would say, an escalation that is to be, considered. Especially in the last three days, we have Kuwait asking all the Kuwaitis to leave Lebanon. We have Canada ready to evacuate 50,000 Canadians from Lebanon. And we have other countries that pulled their ambassadors out of Lebanon. There is a parallel, if you remember, when Iran, of course, informed the US and the Zionists 3 days in advance that they're going to attack, in the time frame of April, that they're going to attack, and we know how this thing took place. So Netanyahu is making this statement that we are fighting with seven different directions. He said we are fighting in 7 different directions. Why he is saying this? Because he wants to justify his failures. They are not achieving their objectives. They cannot get the hostages out. They cannot eliminate Hamas. They cannot de-radicalize Gaza. On the contrary, Hamas now have many recruits who are coming to train with Hamas now in Khan Yunis and other places. I mean, imagine 70% of the houses were destroyed. So what's left for the people? Many people, almost 40,000 were shaheed, killed. And tens of thousands were injured, and 10,000 are missing under the rubble. And many Westerners have warned the Zionists, you are radicalizing Gaza more and more. So he's saying, I'm fighting 7 wars with Hamas, with West Bank, Hamas in Gaza, West Bank, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, the Iraqi militias in this regard. So he's saying, I am fighting with 7 because he wants to justify the failure. Is he really fighting with the Houthis? No. He's not fighting with the, is he fighting with the, people in Iraq? No. I mean, once in a while, they send a drone. Is he fighting, there's an army in the West Bank? Of course, no. I mean, the settlers are just doing all the mischief in there. So there is this perspective that a war would break in the north with Hezbollah. And last week, Hezbollah have put a 10-minute video showing one of their drones that went over Akka and took detailed photos of the most sensitive places that the Israeli having to manufacture weapons. It's called Rafael. And the Iron Dome. Basically, 10 minutes of video, and the Hezbollah saying we have more. It sent shockwaves within the Zionists. How could they do this? Where is our Iron Dome? Where is our, IDF? Where is this? Where is this? Where is that? I'll stop here, inshallah, for the sake of time. Questions or comments, inshallah? Any question, any comment? Yes, Akhi. Yeah, the brother is saying that all the parties all the different segments of the society, regardless on which side they are, on the right, on the left, on the center, their aim is to kill Palestinians and kill Arabs. I would not really agree with this statement because I don't think that's really the case. And let me explain. There are people who went to live in Palestine because they get subsidy, cheap housing in the West Bank. There's 850,000 settlers in the West Bank. The bulk of them have nothing to do with this Zionist, ideology of removing the Palestinians from West Bank, throw them to Jordan, and from Gaza, throwing them to Egypt. So there's about 7.5 million Jews in Palestine. This was the statistics as of a few months ago. Now, yesterday, the Israeli authority issued a statement, which is good news. 550,000 of the Jews have left the country and they did not return since October 7th. 550,000 out of 7.5 million. And this is a significant number. So many people in there, they want, from what I know, to live and let others live in this regard. Because basically, they want a place safe for the Jews as the original, theory of Zionists, because before we will have those Zionists who come and talk about getting rid of all the people of the land. Yeah, some of the early Zionists have the same vision. Herod Party, which was headed by Menachem Begin in 1948. You have Einstein and 25 Israeli Jewish intellectuals in the US writing an op-ed editorial in the New York Times, which still exists, warning the US government from Herod Party and Menachem Begin, who eventually became the head of the Likud, and which was inherited by whom? By Netanyahu. They said those are the Nazis and the fascists. So there's 15% of the population who's so-called Haredim. And I'll tell you, if you go to Beit Shemsha, this is a village, it's all religious Jews, they have Palestinian flags, and they do not accept the Israeli government. They have, they said, we would rather be with the Arabs in this regard. Now, I would say that the majority now is what you say. I would not, disagree. But before October 7, this was not a homogeneous society. Let's say 1 million people came from Russia. And many of them have nothing to do with Zionism or Jewishness, secular. Those people were raised under communists. They have no ideology at all. They came looking for a better life. Because they were told that, you will have opportunities in there. This is the most advanced technology after the US. We have the most this and the most this and the most that, and all this now blow up in their faces. So those million who came to Palestine, the bulk of them have nothing to do with anything. So I just want, let's just put things in perspective. And many people will tell you who live, settlers in the West Bank, who have no aspiration to do what the extremists are doing. As I said, you go there, you get a house with subsidy from the government, you do not pay much, you go work wherever you in Tel Aviv or this and that. At the end of the day, you go to this settlement in the middle of the Palestinians. It's surrounded by wire, surrounded by guards, you feel safe until October 7 took place, where those settlements were all raided by Hamas and by many civilians. Inshallah, for the sake of time for the adhan. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring the khair and the good for the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, alleviate the suffering of the people of Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throw his curse, al-la'na, ala ha'ula as-sahayin al-mala'in, and show in them an ayah for this Ummah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with those who are with the cause of the Ummah, regardless if it is in Palestine or any other place, and to be and punish those who conspire with the enemy against this ummah. Allahumma ameen. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. We will see you inshallah next Sunday between Maghrib and Isha. Jazakum Allahu khairan.
الله أكبر الله